In my imagining of what my final Sunday with you would be like, sitting here with Stony in my kitchen was not one of them. I'd hoped for a big crowd in our sanctuary, with familiar faces smiling back at me, with music, with Carrie at the piano, and perhaps singing together one last ensemble with Carrie, Jay, Cheryl, and Wayne, standing one more time at the wonderful communion table, handcrafted by our very own Tom Crabb, with the broken tiles for a tabletop, an ever-present reminder of a Lenten journey we took together years ago, and a beautiful metaphor for the life of the church together. I'd imagined one last walk down the aisle at the end of the service, holding hands with Lindsay and Emily, as together we would offer a blessing to the congregation. But that was before COVID-19, before we made the painful decision to suspend in-person worship for the health and safety of our congregation, and for the health of our neighbors and our larger communities too. There is one plus to preaching my last sermon as First Christian Puyallup's minister this way, with the camera facing me. And that's that I'm not looking at your faces, looking back at me. Perhaps then I may be able to finish this sermon without tears, perhaps, but I make no promises. I chose this Sunday back in February. It was an intentional decision. Our new region had plans for its first Northern Lights Regional Assembly for next weekend, and I knew several of you would be there. And next Sunday was to have been Pacific Lutheran University's graduation weekend. And I had imagined having free days to plan a celebration and a Sunday packed with events to fully soak in the joys and the tears of being a mom to an amazing young man finishing up his college days. Ben was barely a toddler when we first arrived here. I was 34. I came across a picture in my office desk taken by the front door of the church, I think on the day of my installation. We were all so young. It has been an amazing journey, and I am grateful for the gift of sharing this time with all of you. I asked Ben to read from Paul's letter to the church in Philippi for us this morning, because Paul's words have been coming back to me in these last few months. He wrote, "I thank my God every time I remember you." In the midst of all of this upheaval and strangeness of this moment, I have been immersed in gratitude. There is a line from a sermon by Meister Eckhart, the 13th century German theologian and mystic. He wrote, "If a man had no more to do with God than to be thankful, that would suffice." In the 1980s, Matthew Fox would popularize a newer version of those words. If the only prayer you ever say in your entire life is thank you, that would suffice. As I leave you, know my prayers have been filled with gratitude for all of you, for our ministries together, for the common life we've shared, for everything you've taught me along the way. I thank God, first of all, every time I remember how you took a risk to call me as your minister in the first place. I'd never pastored a congregation before. I'd mostly done pulpit supply, a little bit of sabbatical leave, but I had never served as a pastor. And you said yes. To an inexperienced 34-year-old when your previous 3 pastors had all finished their ministries with you by retiring. You took a risk and you said yes to a former Baptist too, which is pretty much a quintessential disciples thing to do. Thank you. I thank my God every time I remember the lessons of hospitality that we've learned together along the way too. You were a welcoming community long before me. When even before my first official day had begun, I saw firsthand how you graciously and gently hosted a memorial service for the adult child of church members, one who had struggled with addiction and depression, and you made space for painful grief and sorrow as you welcomed in her friends and embraced her family. You practice welcome with the inclusion of families with children who have developmental disabilities. You recognize the beauty and the gifts of those who are so often othered and excluded in our culture. Through the years, we've learned to widen the circle in different ways. We discovered that when we said all are welcome at Christ's table, that included Riley, a beloved service dog and an amazing church camp counselor. As the demographics of our congregation shifted, we learned how much our children could teach us, and we made intentional space in our sanctuary for them. And in return, we received the priceless gift of joyful dancing as we sang hymns of praise. Through the years, we've been learning how to become a welcoming people to our LGBTQA friends. And as we've become more open, we've been blessed with their many gifts, and we've learned from their stories when they have chosen to share their journeys with us. I thank my God every time I remember how you have stepped out into new adventures, faithfully trusting that Spirit would lead us. Years ago, we started on a transformation process, and we were thinking it was just another church program. But along the way, we found ourselves learning that it was all process. This whole transformation thing was not just a one-time program, and we were really learning a new way to be church together. In the middle of those early transformation conversations came the invitation to be part of the Freezing Nights ecumenical ministries here in Puyallup, and you said yes. And in saying yes, we were once again learning hard lessons about grace and welcome and inclusion. As we saw firsthand the disparities in our community, the hardships so many of our neighbors endure. And in the faces of Freezing Nights guests, we learned to see our common humanity. I thank my God every time I remember your support and your encouragement of me personally. Not long after we made it through those first stages of the transformation process, you said yes to giving me a sabbatical, even though you'd never given a sabbatical to a pastor before. Through the generous funding of the Lilly Foundation, I was able to take extended time away. I wandered through England and Scotland, Ireland, and Greece. I soaked in so many amazing experiences. I met wonderful people, and I spent time reflecting on my personal story and my faith. And all the while you prayed for me, you blessed me, and then you welcomed me back. I thank my God every time I remember how you gifted me with love and compassion in times of loss. The death of my niece, my father-in-law, my own father, my brother, and my mother, and even during a painful divorce. Your wisdom and your comfort opened up a space for me to grieve and gave me time to process my emotions, and hopefully enabled me to be a better minister to others because of your grace. I thank my God every time I remember how you embrace the idea that churches want to have fun together, to play together, to experience joy and beauty as a part of their lives together. from chaotic, messy church experiments to a magical forest of lit Christmas trees and a labyrinth for Advent, to Fritos, communion, and Easter vigil, bonfires and baptisms, to seasons of creation celebrations, with visits from Ezra Meeker himself, also known as our very own Carl, to an art studio to play, worship, create, and do ministry. I thank my God every time I remember you. Goodbyes are never easy. I'd hoped for a few more gatherings, for office hours at TK's, for coffee at Starbucks with some of you, for a few get-togethers at Cascades. I'd even taken an impromptu accordion appearance in worship from Carrie. Or maybe just a help Nancy pack up her books party. But none of that will happen. But know this, that the words of Paul speak for me and for my great affection for you and my hope for your future. To all the saints of Jesus Christ who are in Puyallup, grace to you and peace from God, our Mother, and the Lord Jesus Christ. I thank my God every time I remember you, constantly praying with joy in every one of my prayers for all of you, because of your sharing in the gospel from the first day until now. I am confident of this very thing, that the one who began a good work among you will bring it to completion by the day of Jesus Christ. It is right for me to think this way about all of you because you hold me in your heart, for all of you sharing God's grace with me. Leave it to Paul to say it better than I. I do thank my God every time I remember you. And so for now I say, be well, my friends, be kind, and always be the church where you are.